let us travel back to the turbulent 4th century before the Common Era, to a rugged, fractured land north of the famed Greek city-states, a kingdom often dismissed as peripheral and barbaric, the Kingdom of Macedon. We are tracing the life of a man whose profound strategic vision would forever change the course of European and Asian history. Philip II of Macedon. The atmosphere is one of constant danger, political intrigue, and the harsh realities of a kingdom perpetually threatened by its neighbors. Philip was born in 382 BC, the third son of King Amyntas III, in a chaotic age where succession was often decided by assassination and warfare. His early life was far from secure, but it provided him with the most profound, unique education available in the ancient world. As a young boy, Philip's destiny was tied to the political survival of Macedon itself. The kingdom was weak, constantly menaced by Illyrian tribes to the west and by powerful Greek cities like Athens and Thebes to the south. In 368 BC, as part of a negotiated peace treaty, Philip was sent as a hostage to Thebes, which was at that moment the most militarily and culturally advanced city-state in all of Greece. Imagine the profound experience of those years. From approximately age 15 to 18, Philip was immersed in the intellectual and military heart of Greece, living not as a prisoner, but as a prized political pawn. He studied under the great Theban generals, most notably Epaminondas, the man who had perfected the devastating tactics of the oblique phalanx, which had shattered Spartan supremacy. This experience was Philip's crucible. He learned Greek culture and politics. He absorbed the nuances of Greek philosophy, rhetoric, and diplomatic deception, shedding the rough provincialism of Macedon. Military innovation. He gained intimate, first-hand knowledge of the most effective military organization and tactics of the time. The weakness of the polis. He observed the fatal, perpetual disunity of the Greek city-states, realizing that their endless squabbling was their greatest vulnerability. In 364 BC, Philip returned to Macedon, only to find his home teetering on the edge of collapse. His brother, the reigning king Perdiccas III, was killed in battle against the powerful Illyrians in 359 BC, along with nearly 4,000 Macedonian soldiers. The kingdom was thrown into a sudden, deep crisis. The treasury was empty, the army was shattered, and multiple pretenders, backed by external powers like Athens and Thrace, sprang up to claim the vacant throne. Philip initially acted as regent for his infant nephew, but within a few months, he was proclaimed king by the demoralized and desperate Macedonian assembly. He was 23 years old, inheriting a broken state facing military catastrophe and internal civil war. Philip's initial response was a masterful combination of diplomacy, political cunning, and immediate military action, demonstrating the genius that would define his reign. Diplomatic cunning. He quickly paid off the competing pretenders and their foreign backers, buying crucial time through subtle bribes and negotiated retreats. transforming immediate enemies into temporary allies, or at least neutral parties. Military reform. Recognizing that a broken army meant a broken state, Philip immediately embarked on a radical transformation of the Macedonian military machine, building upon the lessons he learned in Thebes. This was his greatest, most enduring innovation. Imagine the sound of the metalworkers and trainers as Philip forged his new army. He took the traditional Macedonian farmer-soldier and transformed him into a professional, standing soldier, trained continuously and absolutely loyal to the king. The centerpiece of this transformation was the Macedonian phalanx and its signature weapon, the sarissa. The sarissa was a terrifying, revolutionary piece of weaponry, a massive, two-handed pike measuring between 18 and 22 feet in length. Picture the phalanx lined up. The first 5 ranks of men would level their sarissas toward the enemy, creating a literal impenetrable hedge of lethal iron points, stretching far beyond the reach of the enemy's shorter spears. The slow, rhythmic advance of this wall was unstoppable, transforming the Greek hoplite line, which was static and dependent on a short thrusting spear, into a destructive or offensive engine. The new phalanx was the hammer, but Philip also added the anvil. He heavily reinforced the use of the companion cavalry, elite, heavily armed mounted nobles who were the king's close friends and bodyguards. The strategy? The phalanx would fix the enemy in place, absorbing the shock and preventing retreat. The anvil. Then the companion cavalry, led by Philip himself, would smash through the flanks or gaps, destroying the enemy formation from the side. The hammer. This perfect coordination of heavy infantry and shock cavalry was a completely new form of warfare, making the Macedonian army utterly dominant. Within 2 years, this new army was tested. Philip crushed the invading Illyrians and the local Thracian tribes, not just defending his borders, but decisively expanding them, securing the raw materials and manpower necessary to finance his growing ambitions. His ultimate ambition was simple: to secure the northern coast of the Aegean, and in doing so, break the century-old dominance of Athens over the region. The key to this objective was the control of Amphipolis. Imagine the strategic importance of this single city. Amphipolis was a magnificent, wealthy port city that controlled access to the gold and silver mines of Mount Pangaeus and provided a crucial naval base on the Aegean. In 357 BC, Philip besieged and captured Amphipolis, defying the immense naval power of Athens. The gold from Mount Pangaeus, which Philip immediately began minting into vast quantities of coinage, provided the perpetual, indispensable funding for his later conquests and, crucially, for his diplomatic efforts. Philip famously declared, and often proved, that no fortress is impregnable if one can send up a mule laden with gold. This gold allowed him to build a political machine that relied not just on sarissas, but on sophisticated bribery, network building, and political manipulation within the Greek city-states. The brilliant, ruthless architect had secured his kingdom, created an invincible army, and found the unlimited means to finance his destiny. The small, broken state of Macedon was now a formidable, unified power. We move now into the second, more complex phase of Philip's reign, where the military genius of the battlefield was matched, and sometimes even overshadowed, by the brilliance of his diplomatic and political strategy. His gaze turned south, toward the fragmented, jealous, and politically paralyzed Greek city-states. Philip's grand strategy for dominating Greece was patient and methodical, a slow, deliberate tightening of the noose around the powerful, autonomous city-states. He avoided a direct, massed invasion for years, preferring to use diplomacy, bribes, and carefully staged military interventions disguised as pious missions. The most intense, defining political struggle of this era occurred not with spears and shields, but with the power of rhetoric, fought in the Assembly of Athens. The champion of freedom, the voice of the old, independent Greek order, was the great Athenian orator, Demosthenes. Imagine the clamor and intensity of the Athenian assembly. Demosthenes saw Philip for exactly what he was, an existential threat to Greek Eleutheria, freedom. He delivered a series of impassioned speeches, the famous Philippics, warning his countrymen that Philip was not merely a strong neighbor, but a tyrant, plotting the total enslavement of Greece. Demosthenes' warnings were eloquent, accurate, and often prophetic. He excoriated the Athenians for their complacency, their focus on internal squabbles, and their failure to recognize the danger until it was literally at their gates. He urged a policy of immediate, aggressive military resistance against every single one of Philip's encroachments. However, Demosthenes faced powerful opposition from other Athenian orators, notably Isocrates and Aeschines. These figures argued that Philip was not an enemy, but the necessary unifier of the Greek world. They believed the age of the independent warring city-state was over, and that only Philip could end the endless inter-Greek wars. Moreover, they saw Philip as the only figure capable of leading a massive, pan-Hellenic invasion against the greatest enemy of all, the Persian Empire, a cause that had immense historical resonance after the Persian Wars. The political battle between these factions was a reflection of the deep-seated exhaustion and political paralysis within Greece. Philip skillfully exploited this division, utilizing his gold to secure allies, fund pro-Macedonian factions in every major city, and neutralize opposition at crucial moments. The flashpoint that finally brought Philip's army deep into the heart of Greece was the Third Sacred War, 356 to 346 BC. This was a protracted conflict, ostensibly fought over a religious transgression. but which Philip shrewdly manipulated for his own ends. He intervened on the side of the offended religious league, portraying himself not as a foreign conqueror, but as the pious defender of the Delphic Amphictyonic League, the sacred council that governed the Oracle of Delphi. This allowed him to march his army deep into central Greece, gain a strategic foothold in focus, and secure a prestigious seat on the sacred council, giving him, the barbarian king, a moral and political authority he had never before possessed in the Greek world. The long war finally concluded with the Peace of Philocrates in 346 BC. This peace treaty was a massive political triumph for Philip. Athens, exhausted and diplomatically outmaneuvered, was forced to recognize all of Philip's territorial gains, formally ending their decades-long dominance of the Aegean. From this point on, Philip was no longer an external threat. He was an internal, unavoidable power in the Greek political system. The sheer scale of Philip's ambition and political skill is also revealed in his complex, often turbulent, personal life. His primary goal was dynastic security and the creation of strategic alliances through marriage, a concept known as polygamy for political gain. Philip married 7 times, each marriage securing a new frontier, a new alliance, or a new source of legitimate heirs. The most famous of these unions was his marriage to the formidable princess Olympias of Epirus, which produced the legendary Alexander III, whom history remembers as the Great. The passionate, often violent relationship between Philip and Olympias, and the intense rivalry that developed between Philip and his ambitious son, would define the final years of the king's life. As Philip consolidated his power over the Greek world through a combination of dazzling battlefield victories, strategic alliances, and diplomatic bribery, the opposition led by Demosthenes knew that the final, decisive confrontation was inevitable. The final war would be fought over the principle of freedom itself. The final spark was struck in 338 BC. Philip, once again intervening in a minor religious dispute, marched his army south toward Thebes and Athens. Demosthenes, finally successful in his desperate pleas, managed to forge a reluctant, final alliance between Athens and Thebes, the two great traditional rivals of Greece. The final, massive confrontation would occur on the plains of Chaeronea. We now reach the climactic moment of Philip's career, a day that decided the political fate of Greece for centuries to come. The Battle of Chaeronea in August 338 BC. This was the ultimate test of the Macedonian military machine against the finest soldiers of the old Greek world. The allied Greek army, spearheaded by the renowned Theban Sacred Band and the massive Athenian hoplite phalanx, positioned themselves defensively at the pass near Chaeronea. This was their final, desperate stand for the independence of their city-states. Philip, leading his army of approximately 30,000 infantry and 2,000 cavalry, deployed his forces with characteristic brilliance. He placed his invincible Macedonian phalanx on the right, facing the Athenians. On the left wing, he placed the companion cavalry, commanded by his young, immensely promising son, Alexander, who was just 20 years old, facing the crack Theban sacred band. Philip himself took command of the right, directly opposite the massive Athenian line. Imagine the deafening sound of the thousands of long sarissas being leveled, the rhythmic thump of the heavy shields. The battle unfolded precisely as Philip intended. On the right, Philip executed a calculated, controlled feigned retreat. The Athenian commander, believing he was breaking the Macedonian line and seeking a decisive victory, rashly ordered his hoplites to advance. This forward movement stretched the Athenian line, crucially creating a massive, momentary gap between the Athenian flank and the allied Theban forces. At that exact split second, Alexander, seeing the gap his father had created, unleashed the devastating companion cavalry. He smashed through the exposed flank of the allied line, wheeling around to face the elite Theban sacred band, who, fighting with incredible courage, were surrounded and destroyed to the last man. A profound, symbolic end to the old Greek order. Meanwhile, Philip abruptly halted his retreat, reformed the phalanx, and launched a brutal counterattack against the disorganized, overextended Athenians. The Athenian line was shattered and routed. The great coalition of Greek freedom was utterly destroyed. Chaeronea was the end of the line. The victory was total and decisive. The age of the independent Greek city-state, the polis, was over. Philip treated the defeated states with characteristic political shrewdness. He dealt harshly with Thebes, executing some leaders and installing a Macedonian garrison. But he treated Athens with immense, surprising leniency, allowing them to retain their democracy and autonomy. Realizing that he needed the Athenian fleet and the support of its intellectuals for his next monumental project, he was conquering Greece not to destroy it, but to lead it. In 337 BC, Philip completed his political masterpiece by establishing the League of Corinth, known as the Hellenic League. Imagine the gathering of the representatives of all the Greek states, except Sparta, who famously refused to participate, at Corinth. Philip did not claim the title of King of Greece. Instead, he declared himself the hegemon, the leader or commander of the League. The League's stated purpose was a perpetual peace among the Greeks and a mutual defense pact against all foreign enemies. But the true purpose was the unification of Greek forces under a single Macedonian command for Philip's ultimate, lifelong ambition, the invasion of the Persian Empire. Philip was not merely content to rule a troubled corner of the Balkans. He was aiming for the inheritance of the wealth and glory of Asia. He skillfully presented the invasion to the Greeks not as a war of conquest, but as a long overdue retribution for the Persian invasions 150 years earlier. It was a holy war of revenge, designed to bind the Greeks to his command. The vast campaign was set. Advanced Macedonian forces were already crossing the Hellespont to establish a beachhead in Asia Minor, led by the generals Parmenion and Attalus. Philip was at the absolute zenith of his power, prepared to launch the greatest military expedition the world had ever seen. Yet fate, often cruel to those at the pinnacle of power, intervened. The final, turbulent years of Philip's life were marked by intense, dramatic, dynastic rivalry. In 337 BC, Philip married a young Macedonian noblewoman, Cleopatra, the niece of the influential general Attalus. At the wedding banquet, Attalus, intoxicated, publicly insulted Alexander, suggesting that Philip should now seek a legitimate heir who was pure Macedonian, a profound slight to Alexander's mother, Olympias, and Alexander himself. The enraged Alexander challenged his father and fled Macedon, beginning a tense period of estrangement. The complexity of these political and dynastic feuds set the stage for the tragedy. In 336 BC, Philip was preparing a magnificent ceremony, the marriage of his daughter Cleopatra to King Alexander of Epirus, Olympias's brother, an event designed to publicly reconcile the fractured royal family and serve as the symbolic kickoff for the Great Asian Campaign. Imagine the great theater in Aegae, the ancient capital, packed with dignitaries from across the Greek world, all assembled to witness the power of the hegemon. Philip was making his grand entrance, alone, unprotected by his bodyguards, marching into the theater to show his confidence in the unity he had forged. Then, the final shocking moment. A young Macedonian noble, Pausanias of Orestis, a member of the king's own bodyguard, surged forward from the crowd. He drove a long, hidden knife deep into Philip's side. The wound was mortal and immediate. Philip II of Macedon, the genius who had invented the modern army, united Greece, and stood poised to conquer the world, fell dead on the stone floor of the theater, amidst the gasps of his assembled subjects. The assassin was immediately pursued and killed, but the reasons behind the assassination remain one of the most enduring, unresolved mysteries of ancient history. Imagine the great theater in Aegae, the ancient capital, packed with dignitaries from across the Greek world, all assembled to witness the power of the hegemon. Philip was making his grand entrance, alone, unprotected by his bodyguards, marching into the theater to show his confidence in the unity he had forged. Then, the final, shocking moment. A young Macedonian noble, Pausanias of Orestis, a member of the king's own bodyguard, surged forward from the crowd. He drove a long, hidden knife deep into Philip's side. The wound was mortal and immediate. Philip II of Macedon, the genius who had invented the modern army, united Greece, and stood poised to conquer the world, fell dead on the stone floor of the theater, amidst the gasps of his assembled subjects. The assassin was immediately pursued and killed, but the reasons behind the assassination remain one of the most enduring, unresolved mysteries of ancient history. Was it a revenge killing by Pausanias for a personal slight? Was it orchestrated by the vengeful, exiled Queen Olympias to secure her son's throne? Or was it an ultimate, ruthless plot by the King of Kings, Darius III, to eliminate the one man who truly threatened the Persian Empire? The mystery remains, but the outcome was undeniable. The reign of the great, ruthless architect had ended abruptly, leaving his 20-year-old son, Alexander III, to inherit the most perfectly constructed, powerful military machine the ancient world had ever known, along with the ultimate, fully prepared strategic objective, Asia. Philip II laid the foundation. Alexander the Great built the edifice. Without the Sarissa, without the gold of Pangaeus, and without the strategic victory at Chaeronea, the history of Alexander's conquests could never have occurred. As we close this chronicle, remember the ultimate sound of Philip's legacy, the rhythmic, unstoppable thump of the 20-foot sarissa.